This is the Investor Connect podcast program. I'm Halti Martin. I'm the host of this show in which we interview angel investors, venture capital, family offices, private equity, and many other investors for early stage and growth companies. I hope you enjoy this episode. Well, hello, this is Hal Martin with Investor Connect. Today we're here with Manuk Hergnyan of Granatus Ventures. Manuk, thank you for joining us.
Thank you all. Thank you very much. Thanks for the invitation.
So what was your background before investing in early stage companies? What did you do before this?
So I'm coming from the management consulting industry. I set up a management consulting company doing typical strategy development, M&A advisory, investment advisory, performance improvement type of work. I'm still leading that company, which became one of the leading management consulting companies in Armenia, serving also former Soviet Union countries as well as some Middle Eastern clients.
Great. So what excites you right now?
Being in the venture capital industry, it's basically every day provides you with some new opportunities, some new challenges. And the state of the startup ecosystem in Armenia is such that it's in a very dynamic evolution. And we see a lot of new opportunities, a lot of startups, and particularly very much excited about new opportunities in deep tech and companies that apply scientific knowledge and discoveries to full commercial opportunities. And particularly some of the applications that help address the most fundamental problems that the humanity and the societies are facing. And I see a lot of power that the technology to solve those issues, but also some of the associated risks. So we live in an unprecedented era of very rapid transformational changes in the society, and it's very hard to assess all these opportunities at once. But this is a kind of a lifetime opportunity for us in the venture capital industry to be able to be part of this story.
Well, great. So what's your advice for investors? What do you tell them to do before they write that first check for a startup?
That's a pretty broad question, actually, because every startup and every team is quite different. Very, very often we see that very early startup teams, they spend quite little time in understanding the market and whether they are serving or trying to solve the real human problem. There's a lot of hype out in the market, and a lot of teams and startups are just being focused on technology side of the company. So they're very obsessed with the technology to improve this feature or that feature, and very much overlooking the real need and the type of a problem they're trying to solve. Whether this is a fake problem or this is a real problem, they're working on that. So basically, the most important piece of advice we usually share with these very young, aspiring entrepreneurs is to really understand the market, the need they're trying to serve. And then once we are an investor into the company, typically an important part of the engagement we have with companies is assuring the sustainability of the business, ability to have runway to be able to deliver all their plans, because the plans could be bright, but if they don't have enough time to build the product and to convince the customers, then it's going to be a failure. But on top of that, the most important part as investment criteria for us is team composition and the team dynamics. As early stage investors, we see a lot of pivots during the startup journey. So we understand that the initial hypothesis on the product, the features, the market, the segments they serve may not be right. So the team should have the ability to change change the direction of the company and not be broken in the process. That requires a more balanced set of competencies as a team they have to have, and the internal dynamics as a founding team they have. So that's the most critical aspect of a company we're looking at, and sometimes being called to help in those issues. So picking the right co-founders is really a critical decision in terms of the trying to fill the gaps in competencies, and in terms of also some profiles of the people engaged in the team. So they have to have a healthy, a harmonious relationship between the team members. That's very important part for us as early stage investors.
Great. So on the other side of that table, what do you advise CEOs to do before they start up that company? What should they prepare before they go live with it?
That's also pretty broad. And in some cases, as I said, it touched in my previous answer, is picking the right co-founder is really critical. But once they're running their companies, I think the execution discipline is very important. Once they get external funding, particularly, they have to deliver. And in many cases, we see the visionary founders, but they lack the execution capabilities and execution discipline. It's very rare to see these two traits in one person, and these are really exceptional founders and the stars. And we're trying to invest as investors to invest in the companies that have those star CEOs. But so this execution discipline is very critical, and that's one of the areas that we try to get focused with the team once we are on board.
Great. So your fund focuses on Armenia. How is the startup industry in Armenia evolving these days, and what changes do you see coming up?
No, actually, it's quite a dynamic. We are the first venture capital firm in Armenia, started back in 2013. At the time when they started, there were just a handful of startups. The IT industry was transitioning from being just a destination for outsourcing contracts or custom software development to real productization and tech entrepreneurships. And fast forward 6 years, now we see a completely different industry, a lot of interesting startups, some success stories. International capital came to the country, significant rounds have been raised. So currently, there were a lot of copycats in the first stage. Currently, more and more startups are being focused on developing technologies, and particularly AI and machine learning are among the favorite technologies and the priority areas for Armenian entrepreneurs, given that it requires a lot of mathematical knowledge. And Armenia historically has been one of the centers of math and physics back in the Soviet time. And we have a good heritage, scientific heritage and educational heritage. And this is being kind of revived currently and being deployed in commercial opportunities in AI, machine learning, data science, and similar opportunities. One particular aspect of the Armenian ecosystem is that there are quite intensive links with advanced ecosystems, particularly US, and the trends and patterns of development in the US ecosystem are being very fastly transmitted into Armenia. And there, you would see a lot of teams with one co-founder from Armenia, the other co-founder from America, starting their own businesses, and having kind of consumer-facing front offices in the US, while the back offices in Armenia, development centers in Armenia. So that creates a lot of interesting opportunities, given that Armenia is a small market. So no one these days, at least the majority of the startups, they don't try to solve the local problems. They try to solve global problems. So in other words, turning the disadvantage of being a small country into an advantage of a global mindset just from the outset of development. So these are the most important probably patterns of development and trends that I would like to highlight.
Well, that's great. Well, let's talk about your fund. What's your investment thesis, and what do you look for in particular for startups to invest in?
Yeah, so our investment mandate is to invest in companies that have some connection to Armenia. Not necessarily they have to be Armenian companies. They could be from anywhere, but we help them, even if they're a foreign company, we help them set up their operations in Armenia. In most of the cases, these are the development centers. We invest in early stage startups. Currently, the priorities are in the areas, in the applications of AI, machine learning, data science, and deep tech opportunities. So we are now starting our next fund. The second fund will have a focus on application of deep tech technologies in solving complex global problems under the general kind of theme of sustainable development goals. So basically the opportunities that tackle the issues aimed for helping address sustainable development goals set out by UN back in 2015. And a few more narrower priorities are health tech, particularly machine learning applications in health, anything that relates to resource efficiency, particularly in enterprise software, and anything that reduces carbon footprint, and agri-tech and food sectors. These would be the priority areas for our second fund.
Can you talk about one or two portfolio companies that fit that thesis and how they're doing?
Yeah, actually, one of the portfolio companies actually we can talk about is a company that has developed the technology to provide actionable analytics to farmers to help reduce the water usage and pesticide usage. The company works what is generally called the category of precision agriculture. They fly with airplanes, capture images, analyze those images, and provide insights and analytics to farmers. Again, this is an interesting case of combination of US Armenian entrepreneur who is leading that commercial effort in the US while have the biggest technology team in Armenia. That's one of the examples from our portfolio companies. Another portfolio company that is helping to accelerate the work of databases, actually, by doing so, they reduce the consumption of data centers about 5-6 times. So data centers are becoming an increasingly important source of energy usage. That's why it is helping to tackle this energy and resource efficiency issues. So these are two examples.
Well, good. So for the Armenian startup, of course, every startup has challenges, but for the Armenian startup, what is the unique challenge they face or the biggest challenge they face?
So basically, Armenia is a small market, and we are somehow kind of detached from large markets. And the biggest challenge is actually market access. As I said, most of Armenian companies developing solutions for global markets and developing linkages to the global market is one of the most important challenges that our Armenian startups face. And they try to fill that gap and address the challenge through networks and partnerships with the diaspora Armenians or other partners in other countries. Second is basically, as the ecosystem grows, there's an increasing demand for very high quality technical talent. And these becoming a challenge for startups, particularly when more and more international companies are being attracted to Armenia due to the availability and talent, and which is still affordable if you compare it to the Western standards. Then there's growing competition between the startups and the international companies for the technical talent. And startups should be able to provide comparably attractive terms for engineers and technical talent to lure them. So yeah, and these are probably the two important factors that needs to be singled out.
Great. So are there any particular sectors or applications you see that are good immediate opportunities for investors to pursue among the Armenian startups? You mentioned several before, but if you had to pick one or two at the top of the list, which ones would you pick?
Naturally, I will pick the one that we are going to be focused more in the future. And this is the application of machine learning, data science in healthcare, particularly for early diagnosis of diseases and coming up and faster drug discovery. So these are enormous opportunities in the space provided by machine learning. There's enormous data being collected, and this is particularly good for machine learning. And we see more and more interesting opportunities in this aspect, and particularly for very complex and serious diseases like cancer, diabetes, eye-threatening diseases, and some rare diseases. So these are the areas where we see the need for more capital, a bit patient capital, than typically you deploy in consumer applications. And also the combination of scientific insights and discovery with the commercial capital. This is where the development of the scientific capabilities are very important for any country that wants to compete in this area.
Great. Sounds like a great opportunity. In the last few minutes that we have today, what else should we cover that we haven't?
Maybe also some aspects that the risk that technology are bringing. We are very excited about the potential of those technologies to solve very hard, complex societal human problems, but we have to be also aware about associated risks. And we are, as investors, we are very cautious to not to invest in technologies or products that from the first sight provide some benefits, but then bring very adverse effects in the long term or in the mid-term. These risks are concerned about with environment, privacy issues, cybersecurity threats. So that's why we're currently developing our own framework for understanding the impact of our investments. And so the tech for good is becoming a really big theme in this context. So our message would be that we as investors should be more aware about the impact we are bringing with our investment money. So not only kind of commercial returns should be important for us, but also the first and second order effects that those products and solutions that are being marketed with our support and help.
Well, great. Well, how best for listeners to get back in touch with you?
I think the best way is just an email, which is manuk@granatusventures.com.
Great. We'll put that in the show notes. I want to thank you for joining today and hope to have you back for a follow-up soon.
Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Investor Connect helps investors interested in startup funding. In this podcast series, experienced investors share their experience and advice. You can learn more at investorconnect.org. Halti Martin is the director of Investor Connect, which is a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to the education of investors for early stage funding. All opinions expressed by Hall and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinions of Investor Connect. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon for the basis of investment decisions.